African pyramids are full of undiscovered treasures. The interesting part is better understood thanks to the tireless efforts of scientists and archaeologists who have spent their careers interpreting hieroglyphics, monument locations, and much more. And now, a tomb belonging to a great pharaoh has just been unearthed. Sounds fascinating, doesn't it? Let's delve in and find out more about this. There are 3 underground chambers connected by a passageway beneath a Sudanese pyramid dating back 2,300 years, where a pharaoh may have spent his final days. Too much water made it practically impossible to get to this pharaoh. However, it was before 2 underwater archaeologists plunged in for a closer inspection. Do you know the pyramids in Egypt and Sudan are diverse in many ways? The Egyptian pharaohs were interred within these tombs. Pharaohs of ancient Sudan would often hide out in the crypts beneath the temples. Underneath these lost pyramids, a team of divers donned their wetsuits and made a startling discovery. Of course, it required a great deal of persistence, but the payoff was well worth the effort. It's impossible to fathom how this was found. Kristen, Romy, and the other explorers had a light bulb moment and realized where they needed to go. Nastassin, the former pharaoh of Nubia, was buried in a pyramid in northern Sudan. The site of Nuri, home to more than 20 ancient pyramids across 170 acres, is an exciting destination for Romy and his companions. A processional staircase leading to rooms deep beneath Nastassin's pyramid had to be excavated before work could begin. That trip was going to be unforgettable. This was too much for Romy to handle, so he enlisted the help of fellow archaeologist Pierce. Paul Kriesman aided the cause as much as he could. To fund this fascinating endeavor, National Geographic awarded Kriesman a grant. While waiting for Romy at the bottom of the steps, he said, "It's extremely deep today. Because of this, the initial chamber will have very little headroom." As he spoke, he was submerged up to his chest in the murky water. Kriesman walked inside Nastassin's tomb, which was flooded weeks before he met up with Romy. Now was the moment for them to collaborate on a plan to uncover 3 chambers' mysteries. The deeper Romy and Kriesman ventured, the more difficult their journey was bound to be. According to National Geographic, with more than 20 ancient pyramids sprawled across 170 acres of Sudanese desert, Nuri is possibly the most magnificent archaeological site you've never heard of. An archaeological's ideal location, Nuri is a treasure trove of information. Ancient mysteries were revealed to Romy and Kriesman that had previously been hidden from the public eye. To avoid being overwhelmed by the incredible discoveries they planned to make on this journey, they had to keep their minds clear and their concentration sharp at all times. What then do they hope to find? Nastassin's pyramid is quite large. Located to the north of Khartoum, the capital of Sudan, it occupies a tiny flat area not far from the eastern bank of the Nile. According to studies, the pyramids were constructed sometime between 650 and 300 BC. The tomb was built from the Nile, but it nonetheless proved vulnerable to floods over time. All 3 of the pharaoh's chambers were flooded as a result. To do their jobs effectively, Romy and Kriesman need to have specialized training as underwater archaeologists. The spot where Nastassin was laid to rest was just a small part of the incredible scenery that surrounded the explorers. Outside of the Napatan-era infrastructure, Nuri is home to a number of impressive high-rises. Investigations have revealed that some pyramids are located in arid regions, while others can be found in both the eastern and western banks of the Nile, in regions that were formerly part of the ancient African nation of Nubia. Scholars have deduced that the same individuals built the structures along this historical river, since they share certain aspects in architecture typical of the area around Nuri. What lies beneath the pyramids is of paramount significance, but the structures themselves were equally crucial. These tombs served as the final resting place for the royal family of Kushi. To put it simply, the Black Pharaohs served in the employ of the Egyptian rulers and were therefore subservient to them. After the collapse of the New Kingdom, the Black Pharaohs became more prominent. Starting around 760 BC, the Kushites made a determined push into Egypt. There was a noticeable change in the landscape after they had settled there for a while. According to the adage that history repeats itself, the 5 Black Pharaohs lived through a similar period. They pondered their predecessors' practices and decided to construct pyramids to mark their final resting places in the same manner. More than 80 kings and queens were given a dignified burial in Nuri, albeit not all of them were buried in tombs topped with pyramids. Approximately 1/4 of the dead were given this honor, making them the elite of the elite. Kriesman spoke with the BBC in July 2019 to shed light on the Kushites' significance in the past and now. When explaining the Kushites to the BBC, Kriesman emphasized their strategic importance. He explained that the Kushites' strategic location was due to the fact that they were situated on the only corridor across the Sahara where you may pass through the desert in sight of drinking water the whole day. This happened long before the first camels appeared. After the Kushites took control of the region in 2000 BC, their sway waned, but the region's gold production made them impossible to ignore. The Neo-Assyrians still managed to expel the Black Pharaohs from Egypt in the 7th century BC. Despite being driven from the city, they maintained control of the territory they had claimed until the 4th century. Eventually, they were deposed and their reign ended. The area's largest pyramid, Pharaoh Taharkas, is commonly regarded as the first ruler buried there. Taharkas' descendants maintained the cemetery following his death. After the Kushites left, others came for the same reasons. Before all that, events had already changed the Kushites' lifestyle. Those who are familiar with the Bible may recognize the name Taharka. Taharka defended Jerusalem from Assyrians in the Old Testament. Taharka's decisive victory assured Egypt and the Kushites long peace. After the fighting ended, the pharaoh focused on building. After an exciting win, it was perfect. While the Egyptian pyramids' counterparts entombed their kings within their chambers, the Kushite kings were laid to rest underneath their temples. Nubian terrain exploration would be a more substantial undertaking than the average Egyptian expedition. To what end would Romy and Kriesman put their efforts? Kriesman recognized an extraordinary opportunity to investigate the submerged tombs that Reisner has been unable to access a century before. Kriesman felt confident in his ability to complete the task because of his background as both an underwater archaeologist and an Egyptologist. Kriesman's focus on Nastassin signaled the start of arduous efforts. Since Nastassin was the very last king to be interred in the Nuri necropolis, he was given the most unremarkable plot of land there. The stairwell was dug out by Kriesman's crew during the 2018 field season and into the first part of 2019, so says Romy. When Romy finally reaches Nuri, he will find that Kriesman has laid a lot of groundwork for him to join the operation seamlessly. Romy had to get creative since, sure enough, the water was just as high as Kriesman predicted. With caution, she entered the first chamber and began exploring. She explained that the ultrafine silt was being kicked up with every step, making it difficult to focus on what was in front of her. Soon enough, she'd make her way to the second and third rooms. As Romy pointed out, we enter the third chamber by swimming through a low, rounded rock-out entryway. In the distance, we can see the stone sarcophagus, which is an exciting sight, and we can only make out the trench that was hastily dug by Reisner's frantic worker a century ago. In light of Reisner's lackluster performance, Romy and Kriesman have a golden opportunity to steal the show at this day. As part of his mission, Kriesman wanted to thoroughly excavate Reisner's pit to uncover what he ignored. Romy and Kriesman held out hope that the tomb hadn't been ransacked. The two adventurers continued their search for Nastassin's tomb and found evidence that suggested it had not been plundered earlier. The rising groundwater level was one factor that contributed to their conclusion. The burglars find paper-thin foils of pure gold that likely formerly covered expensive sculptures that long since dissolved in the water. As they explore the water, at that moment, they had to stay committed to the goals they had set. This did not entail opening the casket. Since such exploits occurred in 2019, the plan for 2020 is to open the casket and examine its contents. The two explorers, Romy and Kriesman, reflected on the audacity of excavating a 2,300-year-old royal underground during their final dive into the chambers, but Kriesman maintained his optimism. Using the available tools, I think we finally have the technology to be able to tell the story of Nuri, to fill in the blanks of what happened here, Kriesman adds. It's a unique moment in history, although few people are aware of it. In other words, this is a narrative that needs to be told. And that's all we have for today. Please hit the like button and sign up for our channel if you enjoyed this video. First, now we must part ways until the next video.